What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Now today, we have an interview with a weather YouTuber known as EthanWX. Ethan is known for making his videos about severe weather, and he's also interested in tropical weather. He likes to make these time lapses as well as EAS scenarios. Joining us right now, live right now on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, is EthanWX. Ethan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today. I just want to say thank you for shouting out my channel, shouting me out. We got a lot to talk about with the current situation going on in the tropics.
Right.
So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, thank you for coming here. All right, so this is my first question for you real quickly. What is your take on these model runs? We're starting to see a little bit more of a westward shift in the runs since yesterday or even Thursday.
Indeed, we are. Originally, I think, as early as yesterday, we had most of the models agreeing on a landfall near somewhere between Naples, Florida, and around the Fort Myers area.
Right.
But, now things have definitely shifted more towards Tampa, Clearwater, Sarasota. The GFS, actually, as of the latest run now, has it going up into the Big Bend region of Florida. So that's quite a far north shift compared to what we've been seeing. The NHC has also moved their track line up toward Clearwater. So, yeah, definitely a westward shift with the center,
All right.
with how the center has developed.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up for the audience, the cone, real quickly. So what the audience is seeing right now is the cone. So it was at the, just to clear everything up for the audience, the cone was in the Naples area, and now where it is expected to make landfall, at least according to the NHC now, it's north of the Tampa area. Is that what we're looking at, Ethan?
Yeah, that is correct. We're now looking at a landfall. As of the latest NHC track, I'd say around Clearwater to Spring Hill.
Right.
That region.
Okay, my next question for you is, I've been noticing this. The European and GFS, they've agreed on this, and generally, they don't really agree on a lot of stuff. So, what do you take from this, and which model should people trust? And we also have the H-Wharf, H-Mon, and all those other runs. Which one do you think people should take the most from?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the GFS and the Euro are basically, number one rivals in terms of weather models. So, one thing that they are certainly agreeing on is that there will be a major hurricane.
Right.
That is pretty much out of the question. That is going to happen. Now, the thing that they're still not so sure about is exactly where that hurricane is going to go, because we got kind of a complex situation. There's a big trough dipping down through the central U.S., and that's going to depend on that. Where that trough is, how strong that trough is, will depend on, just how far east the hurricane gets pushed before it makes landfall in Florida. Right now, the European model is actually saying that, that turn east is going to happen sooner, and we're going to see a landfall further south between around Fort Myers or Naples, almost a similar track to what we saw with Hurricane Charlie.
Right.
Back in 2004.
Right.
Now, the GFS does not agree with that scenario. It's actually showing, a similar strength, tropical cyclone, Category 3, Category 4, a major hurricane moving north, but not making that eastward turn as soon. And instead, the GFS has it going towards the Big Bend region of Florida, where it will start to weaken because of the wind shear affecting it at that point.
All right.
And then it will come on shore,
Yeah.
a bit later than the Euro was showing.
Okay, so for the audience members, I just pulled up the GFS run just to show you what Ethan is talking about. I've been seeing the GFS runs, and they have this around major hurricane strength, and the pressure's down to 927 according to last run at its peak. But then the pressure just starts increasing, and the hurricane just kind of starts collapsing and everything like that. It makes landfall at a 984 hurricane. I know there's some dry air in the Gulf of Mexico right now, but it's really hard to really judge that it's going to be dropping by almost 60 millibars by the time it approaches lands. What's your take on that?
Can you repeat that?
All right. So at its peak, we have the GFS at 927 millibars, but when it makes landfall in Florida, we're looking at a system that is significantly weaker, around 984 millibars. We know there is some dry air in the Gulf of Mexico right now, but do you think it would really impact it that much?
I personally believe that a lot of that would be due to wind shear kind of tearing the system apart once it gets north of, I'd say, the Sarasota line.
Right. Just for the
east to west,
for the audience, I pulled up the wind shear map for you guys to show it. Sorry to interrupt, Ethan, but please continue.
Yeah, I don't know if it will weaken it that much because 926 is pretty strong.
Right.
That would be, correlate to about a high-end Category 4 hurricane. So, that'd be quite a bit of weakening to get down to a high-end Category 1 or a low-end Category 2 in, just a few hours there. But,
right.
I mean, that definitely could happen. I don't think it'll weaken that much, but it definitely, there's a good chance that it will not hit at peak intensity if that is the scenario that happens.
Right. Right.
So that would actually be a good thing for, a lot of the places further south. They'll get spared, the worst impacts while, the hurricane hits a less populated region of Florida at a weaker intensity, Category 2, say, instead of Category 4.
All right. So that kind of just hops out to my next question. How strong do you think this could get at peak intensity and at landfall?
Now, this is a good question because, the hurricane is about to move into an area of very high ocean heat content, very warm
I'm pulling
waters,
that up right now.
in excess of 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, that's extending well below the surface.
Right.
That's great fuel for hurricanes, especially coupled with the fact that there's very little wind shear across that region of the Caribbean right now.
All right.
So the NHC has decided to be a bit more conservative with that estimate. They're showing it making landfall in the western part of Cuba as a high-end Category 2, maybe low-end Category 3 hurricane.
Right.
I think really the reason they're showing that is just to not stir up as much fear because, there's a very real chance that it gets into those waters and it pulls a rapid intensification cycle similar to what we saw with Gustav in 2008, where it becomes a high-end Category 4 in, only a few hours just because of that extremely good shear conditions and very deep ocean heat content.
Right.
Very warm waters for a pretty large area. And, that landfall in Cuba, that region is not very mountainous. It's pretty flat. It's a lot of farmland, and it's not very wide either.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it might spend a couple of hours in Cuba, and it'll be more of a net positive, it seems.
Yeah, and it's not moving very slowly like Irma was. Irma kind of sat over Cuba for like 2 days, and that kind of eroded the southern half of the eye wall. Whereas this storm is going to go straight through in a few hours and not really be affected as much by the land. It'll probably only knock it down 10 miles per hour at most. So yeah, I won't say that I'm not going to go out and say that it'll be a Category 5 or Category
it's too
4
early
or
for
anything,
that.
But I think there's definitely the chance that it could enter a rapid intensification cycle south of Cuba, and become and get that strong.
Yeah, considering the ocean heat
I'm not ruling that out
there.
at all. I think that's a very real possibility, but I cannot say for certain that that's what will happen.
Okay, my next question, and this is a quick disclaimer to everyone watching. This is like not what we're expecting to happen, but Ethan, what is the worst case scenario? And I want everyone at home understanding we're talking about the absolute worst case, not that this is going to happen. This is the absolute worst case.
Now, the worst case scenario really depends on, where you are, how strong is the storm going to be. But I would say in general, for the maximum amount of, damage and loss of property, loss of life.
All right.
The worst case scenario would be a hurricane that goes through Cuba, has a rapid intensification cycle before landfall there. It gets up to Category 4, maybe Category 5 strength, hits Cuba. It doesn't weaken very much because of that land interaction. And it continues up into the Gulf and then turns east right into, Tampa Bay or just a little bit north of there. And let's just say, the shear doesn't really weaken it much, kind of like what Charlie was like in 2004, except that was a little bit further south. If we get a major hurricane coming into Tampa Bay, especially with the bay being on the south side of it, you're going to see a very large storm surge getting pushed funneled into that bay, into, St. Petersburg, Tampa. Some very populated areas that haven't had a major hurricane in decades. Fort Myers, Port Charlotte, Naples have all had major hurricanes in the 21st century. Tampa has not had a major impact since at least like the 1950s.
Right.
So, the infrastructure there is not up to date. There's a lot of people there. It's a very populated area. There's a lot of people who might not be able to evacuate. So, yeah, it could be, I would say in terms of general damage, overall impact, that would be the worst case scenario. But there's also a higher chance that it weakens by the time it would get to Tampa, whereas if it would hit Fort Myers, it probably won't weaken as much, which means you're more likely to see a Category 4 or greater impact further south.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, we talked about the worst case scenario. Just once again, this is the absolute worst case scenario we're talking about. This isn't going to happen. We're far from certain about what's going to happen. Now, kind of like my last question for you, Ethan, is what should people be doing right now? Should they start preparing? I know the governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis, has declared a state of emergency. So do you think they should start preparing now?
I would definitely be paying attention, very close attention to it. Obviously there's a lot of panic buying that goes on right before these hurricanes. So I'm sure the shelves are being emptied. I would definitely say, start stocking up on the essentials, water, non-perishable food items, all that kind of good stuff.
Right.
If you're on really anywhere on the west coast of Florida, because, the cone is pretty much everywhere from the Everglades up to almost Apalachicola. So there's still a very wide margin for where this storm could turn.
Right.
And everyone in that cone at this point needs to be at least aware of the fact that they may be seeing a major hurricane in a few days.
All right.
I would say if you're between Tampa and Port Charlotte at this point, or maybe a little bit north of Tampa to Port Charlotte, that's where you should definitely be, getting prepared. That's where I'd say you should probably be, getting ready to evacuate if you're on the coast. Or if you're not on the coast and planning on staying, being ready for a long-term power outage, major wind damage, possible flash flooding from the rain. And also another thing that could be a problem with this storm is a tornado threat on the eastern side of it, especially if it's getting sheared to the north.
Yeah. How does that work?
That's another thing. Tropical tornadoes are another thing that people really need to be aware of.
Yeah.
And, my last bit of advice would be, just listen to the NHC guidance, listen to what the National Weather Service is saying. Because at the end of the day, those are the professionals. They're the ones, making these decisions. Be ready for hurricane watches probably by Sunday night, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'd say they'll probably issue a hurricane watch anywhere from Naples to Newport Richey. And then, once the storm gets past Cuba or through Cuba, then we'll have a much better idea of exactly where it's going to go. And that's when the hurricane warnings will go out, and that's when we'll know exactly which areas will see the worst. But, yeah, quick summary, be aware, be prepared, start getting ready for the possibility of a hurricane.
Right. Okay. That is it for the interview. Ethan, thank you so much for joining. If you are a weather
thanks for having me.
If you are a weather YouTuber and you would like to do an interview on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, please be free to reach out to me on Twitter. The link is in the description down below. And we can schedule a time that works for both of us. So with that being said, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure you go subscribe to Ethan. He provides great content. I watch, I enjoy it. And he did really well in this interview. Once again, I want to say thank you to him. So with that being said, go ahead, leave a like in this video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what your opinions are. And be sure to subscribe to the channel as well as Ethan's. So with that being said, have a wonderful day. Stay safe.